On this episode of the Oklahoma Breakdown with Ikard and Lehman, presented by Riverwind Casino. It happened. Let's go. John Mateer is coming to Oklahoma. Sooners also got a couple more transfer portal commitments. And Josh Pate joins us to preview round one of the college football playoff. And Pate solves all of college football's problems like he tends to do. Please download and subscribe to the podcast. Rate it 5 stars and write us a good review. Follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. Go to okbreakdown.com for all of our stuff in one spot. All right, our man Michael Hosty will kick this thing off. It's time for the Oklahoma Breakdown. It's a beautiful Wednesday, December 18th, and you're listening to the Oklahoma Breakdown with Ikard and Lehman, presented by Riverwind Casino. Riverwind is Oklahoma City's premier casino experience, and there are so many reasons why Riverwind is consistently voted OKC's #1 casino, but it all starts with their amazing variety of gaming thrills and excitement. Riverwind's beautiful, award-winning environment plays host to more than 2,800 of the latest electronic games with a huge selection of table games, including blackjack match roulette, and Teddy's favorite, craps. No matter what your game, Riverwind has it in spades and hearts. And to learn more about their gaming promotions and entertainment options in the month of December, all you got to do is visit riverwind.com. Riverwind Casino, good times, great rewards. And oh my God, thank God it happened. We waited and waited and waited, and we were hearing great things, Ted, but it was just like, when is this thing going to get announced? And it's officially official. John Mateer is going to be an Oklahoma Sooner. And this feels massive for the 2025 season. Absolutely massive, Ted.
Yeah, and we were in need of a big win as a fan base, man. The longer this thing drug on, the confidence, it all just was deteriorating at a rapid speed. The breakdowns on social media, everything's falling apart. We're going to just cancel the program. Yeah, we were in desperate need of a big win. And, this has the potential to be a total game changer for the immediate future of the program. With all the stuff kind of put in place right now, with Arbuckle being the offensive coordinator, next year's a huge year. And to be able to hit the ground running right away with the main player offensively, to have a great understanding of the offense is going to be huge.
Absolutely huge. And OU believes there's going to be a pretty significant domino effect from John Mateer going to Oklahoma. So we'll see what materializes over the next couple of days. We've already seen a couple of wide receivers commit, and we'll get to that. But this feels like it's just going to expedite everything for Ben Arbuckle in the offense. I imagine Ben Arbuckle is the happiest guy in the world about this.
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know what percent, but I'm sure at least some part of him coming to Oklahoma had to have felt good about the quarterback that, really helped kind of propel his status was going to come too. And yeah, I imagine that's a big relief for him. And honestly, I mean, how much easier does it make his job whenever the guy in the huddle every time, the guy that's got the ball in his hands, he already understands the offense. Getting on the same page with the quarterback is probably the most important thing, and they've already established a really good connection, obviously.
He already speaks the language.
That's right.
And then Mateer can then go and teach everyone else the language. And I'm sure they'll do one of the things where, they kind of combine all the terms and they meet somewhere in the middle. That's usually how those things go when someone new comes in. But having Mateer there, having someone that knows knows the offense inside and out and can teach it to all of the other guys, I just don't think you can put a value on that.
No, like they go and throw together all the time. All the skill position guys get together. Even offensive line, however they want to do it, and players and coaches think differently and process differently. And yeah, the coach can teach you everything. Get on the board, go through all the reads, go through everything. But sometimes there's nothing better than another player coming over and saying, hey, think of it this way, or whenever you're in this, you got to remember that it's a lot like that, or how players can process things differently. And to have a guy there that can talk to the wide receivers, talk to the backup quarterbacks, offensive lines, you're right, you can't put a value on it.
I also think this speeds up the development of Michael Hawkins.
Yep.
And I mean, how many times have we had to see over these last couple of years? It's not just OU, but like you need two quarterbacks. You need two guys that you feel very comfortable with throwing them out there on the field. And I think John Mateer is going to get Michael Hawkins up to speed in this offense quicker than it would have happened if he wasn't here. Maybe that's obvious, but I think this will only help Michael Hawkins' development. And you want to feel really good about your backup quarterback. And hey, maybe these guys battle it out. It seems like everything would point to Mateer being the starter, but this is going to make Michael Hawkins better, which makes that entire quarterback room better, which makes the entire football team better. So
No doubt.
it's from that standpoint, it's fantastic as well.
Yeah, and for multiple reasons, kind of like I just talked about, a guy knowing the language and able to maybe put it in simpler terms for another player, but also like when you watch Mateer play and the playmaking ability, throws off platform, creating stuff in the run game, just quick reactive stuff, doing some of his own things. Mike Hawkins is incredibly competitive, and seeing some of that stuff is probably going to have him raise his game really quickly.
I'm with you. I mean, because the guy is absolutely a playmaker,
Yeah.
and he's a playmaker really in every facet of the quarterback position. He likes to push it down the field, throws a really nice deep ball. He drives the ball on in breaking routes into the middle of the field. I've watched a lot of John Mateer, pretty much every snap he's played this season.
Yeah.
I mean, he throws really well on the move to his right. He throws well on the move to his left. He makes quick decisions, right, in their three-step pass game, right? Just gets the ball out of his hands, makes good, quick decisions. I mean, it's cliche, but the guy can make all the throws. Got a little bit of a strange delivery when you see it coming out of his hands, like a little sidearm action, but the velocity there is there. So as far as him being a passer, right, he's got all the tools, but where he becomes very, very dangerous is as a runner. And that's as a scrambler, he is a big factor. And defenses have to call the game, knowing that he can take off and hurt you. But he's made good decisions in the read run game. With just the straight quarterback design run game, he's very aggressive and finishes with physicality. He's very effective around in the red zone and especially around the goal line. So, I mean, this guy, he does a little bit of everything. There's a reason he was the number one ranked player in the transfer portal.
Yeah, it's funny. Today when I was doing my radio show, it came across that OU offered a linebacker in the portal out of Washington. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. House, I think, is his last name. He was playing like the cheetah position for Washington as a true freshman. So I pulled up the Washington State-Washington game, and I watched like the first 20 snaps, just kind of burned through them. And then I was like, I've seen more high-level throws from Mateer in the first quarter of this football game than I saw maybe the entire season, from Oklahoma last year. I mean, he does some really unique things, and he's one of those guys where, and you've heard coaches say this, I'd rather have to pull the reins back on a guy than be constantly trying to urge them to go a little bit more. And he's one of those players. Like he is not scared, and he didn't have a big turnover problem, low number of interceptions, but he is not scared to try some creative throws to try and fit the ball in on some receivers in some tight spots.
He is maybe going to have to adjust the way that he runs the ball a little bit in the SEC when you're just talking about bigger, more physical guys on the defensive side of the ball in the league. But I don't think that Ben Arbuckle is going to try to coach out any of that aggressiveness. I think that's what makes him him. I think that attitude, that demeanor, it's why a lot of people are comparing him to Baker Mayfield. Like just the overall, what's the word kids are using these days? Aura.
Or, yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
that's a big one with the kids, right?
I mean, obviously we have close ties with watching Baker, but it is who he reminds you of. Just because, and I've said this about him quite a bit, he attacks the quarterback position. He's not just a distributor of the football like some guys are, and I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with that. There's different styles of playing quarterback, but he attacks the position. Every play, he is looking to put pressure on the defense and does a great job doing it.
I don't want to be too dramatic. It'll be interesting to see what the domino effect of this is. It does John Mateer being in the picture, does that get some other guys' attention that maybe weren't going to consider Oklahoma out of the portal? I think that's very, very possible. But I think the biggest deal about this is just the vibe it creates in the locker room. It's kind of hard to describe whether it's college or the NFL. When you know you got a dude at the quarterback position, you walk into the building with a different demeanor every single day.
Yep.
It sounds dramatic, but it's just true. When you know you got a dude at quarterback, that means you got a chance each and every week. It just changes how you feel about all the work you have to put in all year long. It changes how you feel walking in there, when it's training camp and you're kind of dragging a little bit. It just changes the entire vibe. And I'm not saying that Michael Hawkins Jr. can't be that guy eventually. I think he's a really talented guy, but having a guy like Mateer that produced the way that he did this season, a guy that plays the way that he does, it changes how you feel walking in the building every day. And this program desperately needs to feel that confidence and that optimism right now with how things went this season. And I think this is the shot in the arm that Oklahoma football needed.
Well, I totally agree. And, whenever there's a lot of good quarterbacks, guys that have good skill sets, can make the throws, have the size, but a lot of times when you're really getting to the high level, you really measure a quarterback by how much better does he make all of the guys around him, and you hope that that's what you see from Mateer, whether it's because he puts guys in a better position by maybe doing some stuff pre-snap, or if all of a sudden, an offensive lineman or whoever it might be feels like, if I can make this block, or if I can, step my game up this much more, it could be the determining factor when everyone feels like, hey, everyone says they're going to win a championship every year, right? I mean, that's how it is. But when teams actually believe that they got the dude there that can take them to that level, you're right. It totally changed the dynamic in the locker room.
The domino effect isn't just the transfer portal guys. I've talked to some people that think R. Mason Thomas, if he came out, would be a top 100 pick. And these are guys that know what they're talking about. That scout college players for a living. Now that John Mateer's in the picture, that's something that our Mason Thomas may look at and go, you know what? Another year at OU sounds like a lot of fun. Just think of how it affects the guys on defense. We're thinking about the effect on the offense because the offense was, had as many issues as it did this year. But think of how this affects the way that the guys on defense feel. Like they played at a high level this year, and several games that felt like they didn't have a chance because of what was going on the other side of the ball. All of a sudden, you're expecting to have a dude at quarterback and for the offense to be humming. Like that changes how you feel as one of the guys on OU's defense.
Get that man the ball back. All we got to do is get that man the ball back, right? We give him the ball with the last chance to go win it. He's going to get it for us. The whole attitude changes. Now, cart before the horse, possibly to some degree, but I think
it was a rough season. Let us be excited.
No,
damn it.
The impact is going to be huge. Now, the pressure's going to be on, right? And it's going to be a different ball game than playing out there in on the east side of Washington, right next to Idaho. You're going to be playing at Tennessee, at Alabama, at South Carolina, hosting LSU with all of our old players. So it's it's going to be a totally different dynamic. But when you watch him play, you kind of feel like that dude's kind of made for this environment.
That's how it looks. That was a lot of material love, but we're excited. Leave us alone, people. It's a huge deal, and it's something that OU had. It just had to happen, right? And they made it happen. And they're with the type of money this guy's going to be making. That's part of it. Now there are going to be high expectations and a lot of pressure. But like you said, Ted, I think he's built for it. You want to talk about the other guys?
Yeah.
Let's do it. But first, hitting the highway, remember to stop at Love's Travel Stops. You can't miss the heart of the highway. And with the Love's app, you can also save big. How big? 10 or 15 cents big. Save 10 cents per gallon on gas and 15 cents per gallon on auto diesel. Save with the Love's app today and be welcomed by clean places and friendly faces. Certain conditions may apply. See loves.com for details.
Who doesn't love a beefy deal during the holidays? At Didier Ranch, they are bringing their beef in a box full of deals. When you order on DidierRanch.com, you will get free shipping throughout the holidays. And if you use code Oklahoma15 at checkout, you'll also get 15% off your order. Get Oklahoma's finest beef when you order from Didier Ranch. Didier Ranch, tradition tastes better.
And we are brought to you by Simple Modern, the official drinkware partner of the OU Sooners. This holiday season, get every Sooner on your list covered with Simple Modern's holiday gift guide, sure to make everyone feel holly jolly and bright. Head to simplemodern.com to check out gifts for everyone like drinkware, totes, kids gifts, and all your favorite licensed character merchandise. And now, with Simple Modern's new personalizer, you can create personalized gifts with just a few clicks. With 10% of all Simple Modern profits going to charity, you're also spreading holiday cheer all over Oklahoma and beyond. Simple Modern. It's good everywhere. Mateer wasn't the only one to commit to Oklahoma on Wednesday. Let's start with Javonnie Gibson. Really intriguing prospect. He is 6'3" and 205 pounds, and he looks the part. He looks like an SEC wide receiver. He looks like one of those guys from Tennessee, is what he looks like. Had 70 catches for over 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns this season for Arkansas Pine Bluff. Now, clearly playing in the SWAC is not playing in the SEC, but when you just look at the traits, you look at the physical tools, Ted, this looks like a guy that can help this football team.
Yeah, we're going to have twin Gibsons out there at wide receiver with some big size. Yeah, I agree. He's got a lot of production, and I know people are going to get caught up where some of these guys are coming from. I firmly believe that we've locked up the quarterback position. If we solidify the offensive line, which I feel really good about, just with the young guys that got to play this season and who we have coming in, and I think they're making some moves in the portal, probably add just, a couple of guys. Health is always going to be a factor there, but if you get the quarterback and you get the offensive line, I think a lot of these wide receivers are probably going to surprise you with what they can bring when your offense is healthy and functioning as it's supposed to. Outside of a handful of there's some wide receivers that are first round guys, and it the first time you see them play. Okay, there's some special players out there, but outside of that, there's a lot of really, really good wideouts out there that are spread all over the country that play at all kinds of different schools. A lot of times the difference is who's throwing them the football, what's the offense they're in look like. And if you can give your quarterback a little bit of extra time, be shocked at what can happen down the field and what some guys can look like.
Yeah, I think as far as the offensive line piece of things, having John Mateer, the quarterback, may get the attention of a couple of these offensive linemen in the transfer portal as well.
Do we have any money left for the transfer portal after the Mateer deal?
We got to find it. We got to find it. No, but this guy. When you look at Gibson, he was a big play guy for Arkansas Pine Bluff, but I think the size, the physicality, like I could see him being not just a big play guy, but like a possession type receiver, just with the size that he has, the way that he's built. You look at his tape, he's got a really muscular build. Mm-hmm. So it's not a lanky 6'3", 205 at all. So when I think about Arbuckle's system, like all of those in-breaking routes in the middle of the field, I don't think a guy like Gibson's going to be scared to go into that area of the field with his size and his physicality. Also, all the quick RPO stuff at the line of scrimmage, whether you're throwing it to that guy or you have that guy blocking out on the perimeter, right? He should be a really good blocker with the way that he's built. Emmett Jones has to get him to block at a higher level, and I expect that to happen. And that's the thing about Javonnie Gibson for me is I don't think he's polished.
Agree.
I think he's still I think he's a big athlete that can improve a lot when it comes to the fine details of the wide receiver position. And if you get this guy polished, like he's got all the physical tools. And that's what Emmett Jones and Ben Arbuckle and the rest of this offensive staff, they have to pull the best out of Javonnie Gibson and take him to his ceiling as a player.
Yep. And oftentimes the best thing for that is competition, and when you're coming from a place where you were the guy, maybe you didn't have to really dial in on every single little detail. Well, that's going to be totally different. And I'm with you. I hopefully what we've seen is just, scratching the surface, so to speak. He checks a lot of the boxes. Now, going to be up to him to see if he can carry that over and produce in a big time conference, because it's going to be different. Those DBs, it's going to be totally different. And, but he's got the physical skills to do it. We'll see.
We'll see. I'm intrigued. Very intrigued just by his frame. Now, I was told that they think he's like a high 4.4, low 4.5s guy. If that's true, like that guy better be making some plays. If at that size, if he has that kind of speed, you better go make some plays, especially if you got John Mateer quarterback. So
yep.
I'm very interested to get my eyes on him during spring ball.
No, I agree. It's that room keeps getting bigger and bigger, I've noticed.
Good. Keontez Lewis, another commitment for the Sooners, coming from Southern Illinois. He had 49 catches, 790 yards, 5 touchdowns. And you look at this guy, I mean, he's just a veteran guy. He's a veteran guy. He was at Wisconsin before that. I think he was at UCLA before that. So you're getting a guy with solid size that's played a lot of football that is old. And when you look at the wide receiver room right now, it's very, very young. So I do think there's a lot of value in getting an old man in the room.
Yep. We played a lot of ball, a lot of different places. You pick up a lot of skills and nuance of the game. The more places you play, um, again, it's going to be competitive. I know the thought out there is that we've got absolutely no one on roster right now at wide receiver. I actually don't think that's the case. We got a couple of really good young players coming in this recruiting class. And, some of the young guys that were asked to step in and play this year wasn't really the expectation before all the dominoes started to fall injury wise. I think those guys are going to step their game up. And, I think overall it's going to be difficult to get on the field at wide receiver. And they're not done yet. There's going to be some more additions.
Keontez Lewis is just a great wide receiver name.
It is. At wide receiver, you have to have the name to where you sound like a star.
Yeah. Let's hope he's a star. I don't really know what to expect from him. The way that he's kind of bounced around throughout his college career, solid production at Southern Illinois, but like not eye-popping numbers. Like you think about the difference between Gibson, right, over 1,200 yards, and then Keontez Lewis, you're looking at not even 800 yards. So pretty big gap there, but we'll see. We'll see what he ends up being a player. I don't think there's any harm in getting a veteran guy that's played a bunch of college football though.
No, I totally agree.
Sooners landed an offensive tackle. Stanford transfer Luke Baklenko. Is that right? Baklenko? Baklenko.
As
Baklenko.
far as I know, yeah. Baklenko.
Interesting player. 6'6, 305 pounds. I did an In the Weeds on our YouTube channel about him if you want to go check that out. I'm stereotyping the guy. I expect him to come in and learn the playbook quickly. He went to
Smart
Stanford. I
guy.
mean, yeah, come on. Smart guy. Figure it out. As a former smart guy offensive lineman, come on, come in and figure it out. Shouldn't take him long. But he's not the most athletic guy. When I watch him, now he's not a bad athlete. He's not like a guy that really bends at the waist or like is super stiff. I just don't think he's a fast offensive lineman.
Yeah.
However, I think he's athletic enough. And if you're not going to be an excellent athlete at tackle, you have to be a technician and you have to be a tough guy. Preferably both, but usually it's kind of a combination of both categories. Right? Oh, he's got solid technique, but whoa, he's a tough guy. Or oh, he's not, he's a little more finesse, but my goodness, look at the technique.
Right.
So if you're not a really athletic guy at the tackle position, you have to have that technician component and you got to have that nasty component. And lucky for Baklenko is he's coming to play for a guy that's obsessed with both of those things. The thing about him is when you get an offensive line transfer, typically think, hey, this is a 1-year rental guy. That's not it. He just finished his true sophomore year. I think this guy has a lot of room for growth. Ted, physically, I think he's still filling out his frame, and then I think the technique will get polished under Beaton. He's got some really good reps on tape. I mean, they played 3 playoff teams this year at Stanford, and he's got a lot of good reps in all 3 of those games.
Yeah, I mean, good experience is hard to come by. Especially at such. I mean, to get a guy that's played a lot of football against top competition that still has multiple years of eligibility left. I mean, that's not easy to come by, and I'm with you. Tough, a good technique can get you pretty far. If you've got 2 of the 3, and you can work on the third. I don't know that you'll ever be an excellent athlete, but you can get bigger, faster, stronger, and and combine that with your technique and everything. So I don't know. I mean, we need depth. We need quality depth. I know that, some of the young guys, we'll see how they factor in right away. But the more guys that you have that have played football and you don't feel like you're sending someone out there to the slaughter whenever you put them in the football game. We need guys like that right now. It may take a little bit for, Fogier, Fasusi to turn into the type of players you think they're gonna be, and you need some players to bridge that gap.
Creates more competition in the room.
Yep.
I'm sure that Luke Baklenko's not coming to Oklahoma going, you know what? I want to be this backup swing tackle. And he's played left and right tackle, predominantly right tackle this year for Stanford, but in the Cal game he played both. So
Arbuckle will throw an extra tackle out there every now and then.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, he will. 6 offensive linemen, people. Don't forget it. Goal line jumbo package. But do you want me to unload my notes on Baklenko on you real quick?
Sure.
I'll do him at hyperspeed. Pass protection. Has some good reps on tape where he's really nice and balanced in his set. Throws his punch aggressively. Lunges a little too much when he's throwing his punch sometimes. Gets him in trouble. However, I feel that he is proactive with his hands. Needs to learn to throw his hands independently and not just two-hand punch. Does struggle with quicknesses and has had an issue with inside counter moves after being engaged in the rush.
All stems from lunging a little bit, right? It sounds
It
like
just he gets, I think, once again, I think a little more strength will do him a lot of good, especially core strength. Core strength super underrated with offensive linemen. Run game wise, really like the way he comes off the ball. When he's on the front side of the run game, suddenness out of the stance, physical, needs to get his pads down a little bit. When he does play with good pad level, does some really nice things. So that was encouraging. When he doesn't get his pads down, it doesn't go great. Well, that's what happens to every offensive line. He needs to work on his footwork on the backside of zone plays. He's false stepping underneath himself, not opening that foot and opening that hip and creating a nice little angle for him to open, turn, and run. That's an easy fix, in my opinion. It's really hard to create power with the way that he does it on the backside of some of the zone stuff, but fully trust Beatonbow to do that. Something really, really weird. I don't know why they did it. When Stanford went to short yardage and goal line, they took him out of the game a lot. Really strange to do that for a starting offensive lineman. I don't think I've ever seen that before. So, yeah, no, very, very bizarre.
Who'd they kept looking. In?
They'd bring another tackle, number 71 in, and he wasn't good. So I don't know. I don't know what was going on there, but it was confusing to watch. I kept looking for 78. I was like, where did he go? Then weird. I could see him on the sideline at like 3rd and 1. They'd go to this Wildcat passage. He'd go off the field. I have no idea why. Because there are some clips of him on the goal line, and like he looks fine in goal line situations. But they took him out in quite a few of them. I don't know. With what I've seen from him on tape, right now, I view him as a depth piece. But he's just a true sophomore. Mm-hmm. He's going to get better. He's going to improve. He's going to get stronger. I expect the technique to become more polished under Bill Beatonbow. He needs to have a great offseason in the weight room. He needs to add strength, and that will just allow him to play at a higher level. Get stronger, get more explosive. And one thing I do think he needs to work on, and Jerry Schmidt's very good at this, short area quickness, change of direction. He needs to become more sudden as a player. And that is something you can work on. Some guys have it naturally. Some guys got to really work at it. He's got to really work at it so that he can change direction and get his hands on more people out there on the field.
Well, our whole football team needs to have a good year, a good offseason in the weight room. We gotta get bigger, faster, stronger for sure across the board. So I don't know. I think it's a good piece. I know right now the fan base is in the mode of we should only be signing all Americans in the transfer portal. But think we're doing a pretty good job. You know, your Venables said today with the new roster numbers, you know, you may not just have to get to that number, you may have to go well below it and build it back up. And that's starters, that's depth guys, you know, that's anyone that makes your football team better. And it's a solid review, I think. I mean, you got a piece that you feel like you can, like I said, if he jogs out on the field, you don't feel like you're sending him to the slaughter.
I I think a lot of people remember my film review of Spencer Brown last year. I think Baklenko's a better player.
Tarquin comparison?
He could. I think he doesn't move as well as Tarquin. Now Tarquin's USC tape was not good. I'm talking about
No, way
Tarquin's.
better.
Yeah, I'm talking about what Tarquin put on tape for Oklahoma this year.
Right.
But I think that Baklenko could end up being a guy that can generate more power than Tarquin. But he's got to develop. He's got to get stronger. He's got to get more sudden. He's got to get more explosive, and that's all stuff that you can work on in the offseason. And then of course you got spring ball, you got camp, you got all that stuff. But I don't think he's anywhere near his ceiling as a player. I expect him to come into this program and to improve significantly.
One last question on him, and I think I already know the answer, but position versatility, or is this a tackle?
I personally think he's a tackle from his. Yep. I think he could play guard,
Yeah.
but all the things I said about having to get his pads down, it's
Right.
kind of like what we saw with Jacob Sexton this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sexton, when he played with good technique at left guard, it wasn't bad. When the technique was not there, it did not go well. He's a taller guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get those like tackle type frames and you put him at guard, you have to stay low. You have to play with really good technique because the guys you're blocking are typically shorter and strong.
Yeah.
So that's where if you have technique flaws, they get exposed in the interior. They get exposed to tackle, obviously. But if you're playing with high pads, wide hands, you're not going to get away with it at guard either. So
Right.
I, I think he'd need to get a little heavier if he
Right.
was going to. He needs to gain weight anyways, and that comes with the strength gains that we're talking about. But we spent way too long on this. You have sent me down a dark path of offensive line analysis. What have you done?
I'm sorry.
People are like, I thought Josh Pate was on this episode. Gabe Ikard's been talking about this lineman for 20 minutes. Look what you did to us. This was going to be a great episode until you made me do that.
I'm sorry.
Let's get to Josh Pate. I mean, Pate's here to. I've almost forgotten since John Mateer committed. I've almost forgotten that the playoff is this weekend.
No kidding. No kidding.
Pate's here to preview round one of the college football playoff, and as only Josh Pate can, he solves all of college football's biggest problems. But first,
Schwab Meat is making Friendsmas more fun with another NIL partnership for the holiday season, starring Billy Bowman, Jada Coleman, Kobe McKenzie, and Kinsey Hansen. Schwab Meat has been smoking the highest quality turkeys and hams for your special holiday meals since 1912. Every Schwab ham is cooked and smoked over real hardwood hickory for 10 hours. Make your Christmas meal easy this year by ordering your holiday turkeys and hams online at schwabmeat.com. Get free shipping online orders over $75 with code OKBreakdown. Schwab Meat, the official champion of the holidays.
and three things matter in banking: service, and service. And First Fidelity Bank's commitment to exceptional service is more than a promise, it's their foundation. FFB has been by your side for over a century, and they are honored to be a part of your journey. Banking isn't about where you've been, it's about where you are headed. Open an account at an award-winning bank today at ffb.com. At First Fidelity Bank, we go where you go.
And head to the garage for hand smashed patties, butter toasted buns, and ice cold beer. It's the perfect spot to watch any big game. And with all the garage locations being open at 10 p.m. or later every night, it's the go-to late night spot. Visit eatatthegarage.com to find a location near you and order online from the garage in your neighborhood.
It is our pleasure to be joined by the host of Josh Pate's College Football Show. Yeah, it's Josh Pate, and oh my gosh, what is that shirt?
Look at this. How about this? This
Is
is,
that a
I watch the Met Gala and I watch these people, parade around in dead animals and $10,000 gowns. This right here is a big deal, though. You both know this is a big deal because I've been categorized as mildly homeless when it comes to how I dress. And camo is a level up for me. Any pattern is a level up for me.
This is a first for me. I don't know that I've ever seen you in anything but the white tee. Did you just get out of a deer blind?
Teddy, as you know, these are changing times. These are uncertain times. And so I got to be ready. This is me being ready. This is me understanding that something could go down in the very show we're recording. And I don't want to have to go in there and change. I want to be ready.
I hear it. I like it.
let's start with the drones and where they're coming from, okay? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Let's dive into the college football playoff. Before we get into the actual matchups, Josh, what are you feeling now that this 12-team playoff is here? I know that you were a guy that was a fan of kind of a smaller field and what that did for college football's regular season. But now that we have this expanded field and we're only a couple of days away from these games being played, like how do you feel about the new format?
Same way I did, but even when I felt the way I felt about the old format in the moment, I said the playoff itself will be a pretty awesome product. The collateral damage and whatever I think may or may not stem from it, that's another thing. But once you get to December, once the thing is in front of you, it'll be amazing. I do also think that you can't judge the product based on the results version 1.0 gives you. You got to go 3 or 4, 5 years into it, and then you start to get a little sample size. You get different clusters of results. You also get players, coaches, etc., conditioned to the new normal. So, like, one of my concerns was always the possibility that everyone didn't take it maximum serious. And by that, I mean, right now, it would seem ludicrous that any starter would opt out of a playoff game, to go like prepare for the draft or something like that. We're not going to see that this cycle. I don't think we'd see it next cycle. I hope we never see it. But the concept to me was always what happens down the road, not for like a 1 or a 2 seed, but what if we get several years into this and we learn that if you're the 11 or 12 seed, history has started to show us it's unlikely that you're going to make a run. What if I got a projected first round left tackle on one of those teams? What if I got a projected first round wide receiver on one of those teams and they opt out of a playoff game? That kind of shatters the whole thing, is my point. Once you've got it's kind of like when Fournette opted out of the bowl game, then a flood of opt-outs came after that. When you see the first one do it, then it all of a sudden becomes normalized. It has been done before, and it's not nearly as big a shock to the senses. That's one example of like 10 different kind of mild concerns that I've had about it, because like there's no going back. Once you've gotten to where the sport is postseason centric instead of regular season centric, then every bit of oxygen in the room nationally is dedicated to inflating that postseason and putting implications, ramifications on everything based on what it means to the postseason. Well, your postseason sort of complex better maintain its veneer, because if it gets cracked in any way, the value, as we define value in the sport, all of a sudden becomes detached from what value is as defined by players. And that doesn't even begin to broach the whole transfer portal NIL overlapping with the playoff part right now, which is its own mess. So, the more I say that, the more I don't even think you could view the playoff right now in its 12-team iteration separate from all the other problems around it, being roster movement happening right now and, coaching movement happening as well. I don't know that there's a perfect system for college football, but I certainly think I know we could do better than we do right now.
I don't think it's not very long ago it would have been absurd to suggest that a player on a team that has a chance to go win a championship would opt out. But in a world where, like, if you're on a team for 4 years, you've been fighting and clawing to try and go win a championship, there's no way you would opt out. It's the whole reason you're there. But if you're a 1 year rental guy that's there in the transfer portal that went to the highest bidder, you've got no allegiance to anyone there, and you really don't care what your legacy is. And I guess that's kind of the new thing that we have to deal with. It's wild. I mean, it doesn't seem sustainable.
I had a guy who is with a major program kind of in the portal right now. They'll occasionally hit me up because I talk to a lot of them, and one of them will hit me up and recently did just for advice. So what I'm never going to do is tell a kid where I think he should or shouldn't go. I'll give feedback. I'll share with them what I know, but the stuff on the wall behind both of you right now, what does that wall look like for them down the road? And also, when you say the word legacy, that means something, and it should always mean something. It doesn't mean everything. Like, I understand that there's nuance in the discussion, and it's certainly a case by case situation. And I will certainly be the first one to say transferring sometimes is in the best interest of a player, case specific. But broad strokes purposes, I think for it to be a first resort rather than a last resort in mentality for a lot of players right now is so penny wise pound foolish in that they are not equipped right now. None of us really are equipped at age 20 or 21 to understand the benefit of legacy at age 41 or 51 and what that means. Now, if you go make generational first round money in the NFL, great. I guess you made the right decision. Most people aren't. And so I don't need to tell you to, but I do think it bears repeating for a lot of the viewers, a lot of the listeners, and then a lot of folks who are in the position right now as players that come 40, come 50, come 60, when your playing days are long gone, it's really valuable to have a brotherhood, to have a family, to have an entity, a brand that you have attachment and alignment with. And if you played for three different schools and you were really never anywhere more than 36 months at a time, there's this void that the previous generation has filled because they belonged to Oklahoma or Texas or Kansas or Indiana. And you're kind of like, well, I was here, I was there, don't really belong to anyone. I don't know if that even matters down the road, but I got to think some things are universal. Like, I got to think some things are evergreen. And that's just one piece that when you're so in the moment and you're so focused on right now, I'm not even blaming them for not thinking that way because I didn't think that way at age 20 either. It's just kind of a shame that that whole legacy piece is like lost.
I We'll get to the games. We'll get to the games, I promise people. But what you just mentioned, this is the example I give people now. My 3-year-old runs around with an OU football helmet all the time at our house singing Boomer Sooner, and I would not trade that for anything. There is no amount of money that I believe would bring me the joy that that brings me today. And it's all because I have passed on my obsession with Oklahoma football to him. And it has everything to do with the fact that I grew up a fan and went and played there and got to live out a lifelong dream. And I just, there's a lot of guys with the current system and the way that it functions, Josh, they're not going to have what I have. And that makes me sad for them because, like, it brings me an incredible amount of joy and fulfillment, So these guys that are playing 3 and some even 4 different places, I just don't know if they're going to have that place to call home down the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and here's what's brutal about it. So I say a version of that to a lot of those guys. I just say, hey, I'm going to ask you to do something that's impossible. I'm going to ask you to hit the fast forward button 30 years. You're 50 years old. Imagine the advice 50-year-old you is giving to 20-year-old you. It's impossible. I know that, but I try and do that. But then I also I think about the advice that is being given from people who you should know will never be in your life 30 years from now. A lot of the agency world is not worth what's on the bottom of your shoe right now. In college athletics, what is called an agent is pathetic. And you got a lot of people who are very opportunistic. This is a tale as old as time. It just happens to exist in college athletics right now. And to be able to get in a guy's ear and to convince them, look, I know they're offering you 450 here, but if you can get 700 over here, you got to go take that. And to understand like what that sounds like to a 20-year-old player, I know what that sounds like, but to think about the angle that it's coming from, it's just you try and remind folks which places you should and shouldn't go for advice. This is advice that you could give to someone who's never picked up a football in their lives. It just happens to apply there right now. You just hope it gets through. You cannot reach everyone. You may not even reach most, but I think, case by case, there will be some guys that you reach with that sort of feedback. And then hopefully 25 years down the road, they pick up the phone and say, man, you probably don't remember this conversation, but it convinced me to stay somewhere, and it was the best decision of my life.
I think the perfect example of that is Danny Stutzman. I mean, think about he came to Oklahoma as a Florida kid. Lincoln leaves. He has a chance. There was a lot of turnover during that. He had a chance to leave. I think he thought about that. He stuck it out, had a chance to leave last year and go to the NFL draft and stuck it out. And he was on a bunch of forgettable teams in the grand scheme of Oklahoma football. But that dude is going to be remembered forever. I mean, he's going to be an icon at Oklahoma. And like the other thing is you can see you could have predicted this all happening by watching little league sports. I mean, used to you went and signed up on a team, you stayed on the team, whether you were good or bad. You stuck it out. And now you see kids, parents taking them to the better team. Like, we're off of this team, we're moving to that team and moving around. And it's no shock that it has continued.
Yeah, the other thing you got to be careful of is you could be making sound points and also sound like the old dude yelling at clouds, which is just this thing that exists. And anytime there's a person twice your age really railing against something, it automatically becomes old guy yelling at clouds. I remember one of the things when I was very, very young, I don't know why I was this way, but the one thing, fortunately, I did learn pretty early on is when a bunch of folks older than me are aligning on a point, even if I don't agree with them, I'd probably need to shut up and just listen for a second because they've lived twice as long as I have. And in this case, they've lived twice as long as I have, and they've played the game I'm playing currently. So they've learned the lessons. They've lived the life that I'm in the process of living, even if I don't agree with them. Man, it may help to get this perspective. Man, they've already gone down the road that's still in front of me. They may have seen some things or experienced some things that would be valuable to me. Again, just a little caveat there to add into the conversation.
Can you imagine if we all listened to the people that tried to tell us all along, all these little nuggets that they drop? Humanity would be so far ahead of where we are right now. We've all got to go learn it on our own, though. That's just how it is, I guess.
I don't even know how we got to this point of this conversation. This
Have
is
we,
this is
have
what
we,
makes Josh Pate the best,
have
though.
we
We
pressed record? Has anyone confirmed that we've even started?
I feel like the intention was to preview the playoff, and now we've really gone down into a philosophical conversation. It's good. It's why you're the best, man. It's why you're the best. Let's get to the games. Let's start with the Friday nighter. Indiana at Notre Dame. Indiana is Notre Dame is 7-point favorite. Indiana's schedule, right? It was not a gauntlet. We all saw what happened to them against Ohio State. But statistically speaking, Josh, they do have one of the best rush defenses in the country. I got to imagine Notre Dame's going to try to run it at them and kind of manage the game that way. Do you think Indiana will be able to hold up against Notre Dame's rushing attack?
Better than they did against Ohio State. Um, you know, when I look at that one, it's the game that makes me the most uneasy. Like I find it to be maybe the most unpredictable game because it could wildly go one way or the other. But at the same time, to me, it's one of the easier, maybe the easiest game to figure out. Because if you force Riley Leonard to throw the ball, like if they put Notre Dame in a position where the stat you just talked about, that run defense stat, it scales against a really good team, then Notre Dame's going to have trouble. I mean, Northern Illinois put them in that spot, and there was no like illusion about the game. Northern Illinois said, "We're going to make you throw the ball to beat us." They succeeded, and Notre Dame couldn't throw the ball against Northern Illinois. I got no reason to think in 20-degree weather that's supposed to benefit the home team there, if all of a sudden you make them uncomfortable and have to throw the ball, which they hadn't had to do all year, that doesn't benefit Notre Dame at all. So if that happens, we'll probably learn that very early in the game. If that starts happening, it's game on, maybe even advantage Indiana at that point. The other thing is, I really wonder to what degree of pressure that Rourke will be under. Because Ohio State, when they played him, that first drive, Indiana goes right down the field, a couple of PIs called on Ohio State. They score. Some very, very stupid people, including this one right here, sits there and does something you should never do. I tweeted during a game and I said, man, that pucker factor's got to be rising pretty quickly in Columbus because that looked easy. I mean, unless they get more pressure during the day, blah, blah, blah. Well, they proceeded to assault that quarterback the rest of the day. So if Notre Dame does that and they get to Rourke, then and they can run the ball like very quickly, that becomes 30-6 Notre Dame. The one so those are the two things that I wonder about. And the other thing is I have something I call the freeze point in college football. It would be like if you guys are playing at OU and let's say you play Texas Southern or somebody like that in non-conference play, and they've got a stat profile that's incredible because they've gotten fat on FCS competition all year. If they've got the number one run defense in FCS and you play them, you don't care because you're Oklahoma. So you're going to run the ball on them. And you'll probably be successful doing that. This is a situation where there's a much more respectable stat profile because Indiana's compiled it against FBS competition, but at the same time, Ohio State looked at that stat profile when they played him and said, "Yeah, we know what the numbers say, but here's the thing. They haven't played anyone like us all year. So we're just going to go about our business the way we do it." And they did, and they dusted them. Notre Dame will look at it the same way, think the same thing, and they'll go about it the same way. The reason I call it a freeze point is there is a certain minimum level that you have to be able to reach to compete against the big boys. And if you don't reach it, it doesn't matter. It's no different than water. If it's 36 all day, it won't freeze. If it's 35 all day, it won't freeze. If it gets to 32.4 degrees, that's when we can start talking about how long it'll take to freeze. But you got to be at that point. So, like your run defense, no matter what this piece of paper says, it's got to be at a certain point or else you're done and they'll run it 53 times if they have to beat you. But if you start keeping them under 3 yards per carry early on, then it makes them throw. Then all of a sudden the game gets a little wonky. I went Notre Dame in this game. Look at my hand shaking a little bit. I don't have supreme confidence in that. And the thing about it is, I don't ever want to have confidence picking against Signetti because that's the kind of guy that remembers 12 years later if you picked against him.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Insurica's launched a new digital agency introducing Insurica Direct. Whether you're in Oklahoma or anywhere across the U.S., they've got you covered. From small business insurance and health insurance for your employees to insurance for individuals like home, auto, and even Medicare supplements. Insurica Direct's got it all. Start your journey today at insuricadirect.com. Remember, at Insurica, we specialize in you.
And head to opolisclothing.com for our podcast merchandise and the best OU gear out there. That's OPOLIS clothing.com and use promo code TED, TED for 10% off. That's opolisclothing.com. Promo code TED for 10% off. Buttery soft and 10% off.
And I was going to ask you, just kind of, thinking about that game, a lot of times whenever it's close and you're not really sure, a lot of people go coach and quarterback. Right? Who's got the best coach? Who's got the best quarterback? And in this one, I think that's interesting. But I started looking at the bracket, and I'm thinking, who's the best quarterback in this bunch? I mean, statistically, you can look at Dylan Gabriel, but, I mean, I'm talking like overall, am I crazy, or is quarterback pretty weak in this 12-team playoff, considering what we've seen in college football over, however many previous years. It doesn't feel like there's a future like NFL star out of this group. Now, that could be wrong, but as you just kind of look at it right now, I think it's a really interesting 12 teams.
Yeah, you know who it should have been is Carson Beck. If he plays at his max potential, it should have been him with Georgia. Number one, he wasn't that consistently all year. Number two, he's hurt. The one it could be that could make you think in retrospect, I should have seen this coming, would be a Drew Aller at Penn State. He hasn't been that for a consistent stretch in his career yet. Nico Iamaleava with Tennessee, he hasn't been that for a long stretch in his career. But if you think about guys with the tools, guys who are physically capable of being that, it wouldn't be the craziest concept in the world to me, Teddy, that the 12-team playoff ends up showing us that something akin to what happens in baseball could happen in football. In Major League Baseball, it's just who gets hot at the very end. In college football, especially like you said, if you've got a landscape of the playoff that's not littered with future Sunday talent at the quarterback position, a guy who has the tools, if it just comes together at the right time, could end up leading his team to a championship. Like Drew Aller, that second half against Oregon, that dude went off. They had 200-yard rushers against Oregon, and he went off and probably played the best half of football he's played all year. That's the last half we saw him play. So if that stuff starts to come together, and he's certainly got a superstar tight end he can throw to, a couple of their wide receivers started to step up. Maybe it's not Gabriel, maybe it's like a Drew Aller, maybe it's a Nico Iamaleava, but maybe like we're talking about here, maybe it's Curtis Rourke. That entire half of the bracket, by the way, is very favorable because if you've got a hot quarterback, if you tell me any one of those teams gets ultra hot at quarterback, I'm telling you they've got a path to the actual national championship game.
Looking at the SMU Penn State game, do you think Penn State's offense found something in that Oregon loss?
I think so. But as we know, sometimes trailing a team forces you to be a different version of yourself. Now, sometimes you try and be that version of yourself and it's not there and you get beat by 35. Or you try and find a different version of yourself and it is there and you couldn't quite keep up. But what was it, 45-37 or something like that was the final. If you told me at the beginning of that morning, that Saturday morning, Penn State's going to hang 37 today, 200-yard rushers, Aller's going to throw for three, whatever he threw for, I'm thinking, wow, James Franklin just won the biggest game of his career, maybe. It wasn't enough because Oregon's that good, but they're not playing Oregon. They're playing SMU, and they actually are facing a team in SMU that's pretty good pressuring the quarterback. Very, very sneaky good. I don't think a lot of people watch them all year. And then the only vision they have in their head is, well, Clemson got up big early on them. SMU can pressure the quarterback. So I think not only do I hope Penn State's offense found something, but Aller in the pocket, like his ability to kind of Roethlisberger it a little bit, to just kind of subtly move in the pocket, buy a second here, buy a fraction of a second there. To me, that is the difference in them getting upset in the first round and them doing what we were just talking about and kind of clicking into place offensively and making a little bit of a run. Because if I'm Penn State, I mean, just be real with yourself. What you have been over the past several years is pretty solid. It's not good enough to win a championship. In no year is typical Penn State good enough to win a championship. So that's not very much incentive to try and be your typical self. You stay true to your principles, but if you did what you just did in the Big Ten championship game, I got to imagine you bottle that up and you know our only shot to really win one is if we redline it here. We push the pedal all the way down, and you got to accept when you do that, it is a little higher risk, higher reward. But the reward you're chasing is one that you'll never come close to if you do it the other way. So I think the answer to your question is yes. I think it sets up very well for them. They will not face a comparable roster to theirs until the third round, really, if they get that far. So if it implodes on them, that's on them.
It is interesting that, Penn State, the makeup of their football team and kind of how they've operated, you wouldn't say it's good enough to win a championship in what we're used to, where it's one game format against like these super high end teams. But in a 12-team playoff where it's almost a war of attrition to some degree. It almost feels like they may be a little bit better suited. I don't know. It's interesting, but another one is Clemson, Texas, and it's hard to know if watching Texas against Georgia makes you feel like there's some real weakness there. I know their defense is really legit. Offensively, I don't think they're nearly as explosive as is what I expected and maybe other people expected. Is there a chance that Clemson, shows up prepared to play and puts them in a tough situation late?
I think it's a horrible matchup for Clemson. If they do, I mean, it'd be embarrassing for Texas. I'm just going to tell you, I don't think very highly of this Clemson team. They're horrific defensively and giving up explosives, which goes back to what you just said. Texas hasn't generated them. If you don't generate explosive plays versus this Clemson defense, that's on you. To me, also, I'm never going to sit here and question Steve Sarkisian's ability to call a game offensively. I think the world of that guy and his ability to do that. But if I just watched what I couldn't do against Georgia, and I've seen what I've lacked all year, and I know I got Arch Manning sitting over there that I think can give my offense a different gear, a different element. If he's not incorporated in this game plan, it's sort of a dereliction to the duty you have to your organization. I'm all about loyalty, but coaches aren't loyal to one player. Coaches are supposed to be loyal to their locker room. And I know you play the guy that gives you the best chance to win. I flat out think Arch Manning I'm not saying starting him, I'm saying incorporating him into that game plan gives Texas the best chance to win. I can promise you, when they came out of the Georgia game, talking to a few of those Georgia staffers, they were very pleasantly surprised that they really never saw Arch Manning in that game. They just assumed they were going to see him. And they were very happy to see Quinn Ewers continue to trot out there. Not that they lack competitive respect for the guy, but they were very comfortable defending Quinn Ewers. Clemson is not the talent profile that Georgia is defensively. Texas should have some success here. Clemson offensively has been total boom or bust this year. It's either been explosive plays or it's nothing. They have not sustained drives very well. Texas is number one in the country in explosive play rate allowed. I think it's a horrifically bad matchup. Texas should win this game by double digits. They should win the game pulling away. I've thought that a few times this year about them, and it's ended up being a pretty compressed game because offensively they didn't have the gear that you and I may have, all three of us thought they would have. Now they've still won because defensively they're good enough, but Clemson does have a top 5 turnover profile, so that's the kind of game, that's the kind of thing in like a compressed game where Texas doesn't pull away, fewer possessions, ton of variance that could overturn this game. But if the game's played straight up, I see very little path for Clemson to win this.
It's Texas is interesting offensively for me because we knew the running back situation coming into the year with the injuries in camp, but Wisner has turned out to be a dude for them. Yeah, Banks banged up late in the year. We'll see what it looks like for him in this game against Clemson. But is it just me, or does it feel like Quinn Ewers is what's holding them back offensively? That's just how it feels to me.
I don't think you're wrong. I think a lot of I feel that. I feel that. And then, I think a lot of Texas folks realize that. But there are some holdouts who I completely respect. I mean, they're just very, very big supporters of the program, and they bristle at the idea that anything about the team would get called out. And you got to be nuanced with how you're doing it. You're not saying he's terrible. You're not saying he's trash and he sucks. What you're saying is you're holding this team to the standard of what their potential is, which is championship. And therefore, if there's any aspect of the team that doesn't fit that standard, it stands out. It's like a grain of sand when you run your hand over a smooth surface. It's not a boulder, but you feel the grain of sand. Quinn Ewers feels like that to me. Quinn Ewers feels like the kind of guy with all this talent spread all over that field. I think they did a really good job backfilling at the receiver position. They're really good at tight end. Wisner's been a revelation at running back. All that stuff's there. They ought to be 30, 35 a game and dare you to try and keep up. And instead it's, we'll go to A&M and hopefully 17's good enough. Hopefully 20's good enough when we play Arkansas. And it was, but that's fallen short. If that's what you're planning on working in the postseason, they got to win 4 games that way, not one. They're not going to win 4 games that way. So, like to me, that's why I keep mentioning Arch Manning. It's not that I think he's some savior or he's going to come in and like rain bombs all over everyone. It's just putting a different layer of prep in there for the opposing team. It's putting a different athletic layer in there because of what you have to make the other guy respect. I don't see how you don't do that in the playoff.
Yeah, I feel like Quinn Ewers is, like you said, he's really good. I just don't view him as a playmaker. Like what you see is what you get. Makes it way easier to defend. Um, Tennessee, Ohio State is interesting for a bunch of reasons. I thought it was hilarious whenever the the preview show or the announcement show. The first thing Kirk Herbstreit said was they're going to get booed on their own field playing at home, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's interesting. But it does feel like Tennessee is going on the road, young quarterback, but it feels like all of the pressure in a big way is on Ohio State in this football game.
I feel that way. I never believe in having nothing to lose because if you're playing a game, you have the game to lose. So I would never say Tennessee has nothing to lose. I will say I could see them playing a very free, nothing to lose sort of style. I remember when Herb Street said that, and it caught my ear a little bit because I've been around that place a couple of times recently when Michigan's beaten them, and that's the vibe that it's taken. Now, it's a weird thing in college football now because you could lose what's supposed to be the end of your season, and then you just get rewarded with a first round home game in the playoff. But that doesn't change how real that loss was. That doesn't change how toxic it's been around there. They have not gotten over that thing. I can't speak for the guys inside the building. I'm just saying the overall vibe around the entire program it's really uneasy feeling right now. You go grab a 10-0 lead on Tennessee, that's fine. But if they grab a 10-0 lead on you, I think there's a lot of merit to what he's saying there. And also, you got to think independent of how the crowd would handle it. You will never convince me that that program is over that. And that program has just retooled mentally. You can convince yourself of it. You can hype yourself up. You can give all the players only team meetings and speeches and whatnot. But if you're down early and the very things that have bitten you all year are right there on full display, live bullets flying, I think that could be a very fragile team mentally. And it's the team I picked to win the national title in the preseason. And they got the horses to do it, I believe. But they've got to thread a pretty fine needle, given some of the same limitation at quarterback that we were talking about with Texas. It's crazy to watch these loaded rosters deal with that potentially is what's hamstringing them. But I think about Tennessee and their ceiling game, the way that you picture the Tennessee offense is good enough to win a title. So the way they should operate in your mind is you got Dylan Sampson, who's the best tailback in the SEC, got plenty of good weapons out wide. Nico should be able, once that defense is drawn in, to bomb you over the top. He's got a huge arm. But in reality, they're in the 60s in explosive play rate. You saw them when they came in there to Norman, when they played that game against Oklahoma. It was good enough to beat them, but there was that one big play to Thornton, and outside that, they didn't really need to do much that night, but didn't feel like they really could if they wanted to. And they've been shut out in several first halves this year, but it goes back to the same thing we were talking about a little while ago. If Tennessee is the Tennessee they've been all year, they probably won't win this game, unless Ohio State helps them a little bit. But that's not what we're trying to see. What we're trying to do is see around the corner. If they play the best version of themselves and if they peak at the right time, then that pass rush is really good. They're very complementary and dynamic offensively. So all the pieces are there to where if you told me A minus or better from Tennessee this Saturday, I think there's legit possibility we got an upset coming.
Do you think Ohio State's going to be able to block Tennessee's defensive line?
No, well, mixed bag. I think it's going to be a problem for them. This to me is actually where missing two of those O linemen is going to show up. It's very funny. They lost the left tackle, and it was a crisis in Columbus that week. But because things didn't implode, you just kind of get used to, all right, that's the new normal. Well, then they lose McLaughlin, who just won the Remington as their center. And they lost to Michigan, but like it's funny when you have O-line injury, especially. People freak out in the moment, as they should, if it's a really good player. But then the further removed you get from it, the more you just kind of recondition your mind to go back to whatever your default was. You can't go back. You're probably missing your two best linemen off of what was already, relatively speaking, the weak link of this team, relatively speaking, again. And you got to ask yourself, who have you faced? Well, you faced Michigan, who has two first round guys on the interior, and they stoned you. You could not move the ball against them. Well, this is a little different challenge. Tennessee's very deep and can rotate at defensive tackle, but they can get after you in the pass rush more than Michigan could. And so it's probably, man, again, I keep talking about these first quarters. The game's not won there, but the game sort of starts to reveal itself there. And I was listening to Chip Kelly and that offensive staff say, hey, man, we've watched the Michigan game 15 times. We've broken it down. We know what happened. We won't let it happen again. Okay. Well, then the game starts. Then they put the ball down and we really find out like how much action is behind those words. I'm sure they believe it. I don't doubt any of it. But the thing about it is Tennessee gets to game plan too. Tennessee gets to play too. And that's a pretty good team over there. So no, I think they'll struggle all afternoon with both aspects, with run blocking and with Tennessee's pass rush.
Sounds like a take the under situation.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it until, we started talking about Ohio State, but I look at this first round and there's four teams that are coming in that lost their last game.
Yeah.
Texas, Ohio State, both SMU and Penn State. Is that a factor, do you think, for teams to, I mean, it's not the NFL where teams are kind of a little more used to losing. Like you go into a season, you take some losses, it's almost expected. In college football, it's not nearly as expected, and a loss hits way harder. Is that a factor at all?
I don't know. I mean, being the first iteration of this, I just don't know. I think at the end, we will look back and we will say, I should have seen this coming, or I should have seen that coming. I could easily see that being a situation where either it could go either way, Teddy. It could be the teams that lost their last game, they end up, coming out flat, and they're like Clemson, for example, or not Clemson. Clemson's a bad example, but like any of the teams you mentioned there, they could come out flat, and you could say, man, as it turns out, their season was kind of done after the last game. It could be inverted. It could be they come out on fire. And you can find out, wow, you need to bet on teams that lost their last game going into this playoff because the playoff gives them a second chance at life that the previous version of the sport didn't give them. I just don't know which way to take it. It's kind of like in the past when you would win a bowl game and everyone would say, oh, that gave us such momentum going into the offseason. The bowl game didn't really matter all that much. Like it's so anecdotal. If you're great the next year, if your spring prep is great, okay, we'll attribute it to the bowl. We've seen teams get gutted. We've seen teams be terrible after winning a bowl game too. So I think it may be conditional, but I think it plays a factor. I just don't know how to broadly apply it across the entire playoff field.
It'll be interesting to see what this format looks like next year because it feels a little goofy that Boise State and Arizona State have a bye. Let's just be real.
So?
It feels off. Hey, you want to be college football's commissioner, fix it. How are you fixing it? Also fix the portal window too while you're at it. Pate, come on. Fix all the problems.
Yeah, the thing with the portal window is anytime you bring it up, everyone tells you, well, we can't fix it because of the academic calendar and this. They basically explain why the mess is there. But I think we all know it will eventually get righted. Like it will not just continue to look exactly like it does now. So if we are in 2028 and it's been fixed and the portal window isn't the same as it was. My question is, well, if it's going to get fixed, that means it's always been capable of getting fixed. That means the excuse right now is garbage. And so why not fix it right now? Well, the answer is who's fixing it? The answer is where do you look? Like if we were talking about the Buffalo Bills versus the Chiefs right now, if we were talking about the imbalance in AFC North scheduling, we would be able to say, all right, the league office needs to do something. Roger Goodell and his people need to do something. I don't know who that is in college football. I don't know who you look to have their hands on the wheel in college athletics. And also, candidly, these folks are too busy worried about themselves right now and worried about the future makeup and how many teams they're going to have in their conferences and whatnot and what their media rights rev share is to even pay passing mind to how discombobulated the December calendar is. I almost think they look at it as, since ratings are high right now and since revenues are high right now, that means we're making good decisions right now. In reality, your success, both monetarily and viewership wise, is well downstream of the decisions you make. The only reason this sport's ultra popular right now is because halfway decent decisions were made 20 years ago. And college football period in this country has a ton of equity built up in it. We all love it. You could be making horrific decisions right now and still be reaping the benefit of folks who came before you. I don't necessarily think that I would say the decisions being made right now are best for the long-term interest of the sport. So what I would do is I would force action one way or the other. If you're telling me that the future may be an employment model, I may hate that, but get there if that's where we're going. Okay, because then it affords me the opportunity to detach ourselves from using the academic calendar as an excuse for the calendar to suck overall. If we're not going that way, well, then you've got to be telling me, okay, legislatively, we're about to get Congress involved. Again, sounds like it sucks. But if that's the way you're going, go that way. It seems like there have been conferences and town halls and interviews for years now, and everyone just keeps saying, well, this is coming, this is coming. Then make it happen would be, my first question. If you don't have the folks in the room to make it happen, then get the folks in the room that can make it happen. And as for the playoff format, I never wanted to expand the thing. But if we expanded the thing, just expand the thing to whatever size you want the field to be, and then give me my best, whatever number that is, and let's go. There is no, to me, some people disagree with me on this. There is no reputable model that guarantees a spot for anyone. That counts the SEC. If the SEC sucks, they ought to get one or two teams in max. If they're great, they ought to get 6 or 7 teams in max. Once we get to the postseason, I do not care about conference affiliation. To me, those are imaginary lines on a map to me. Once we get to the postseason, just give me the best teams and put them in there. Of course, when you say that, people treat you like you're 5 and they go, "No, Josh, there's more to it than that." But there's really not. There's more to it than that because of self-interest, not because of what's best to crown a national champion.
What if to end this year, you got a little bit better every day? When you're learning a new language with Babbel, that's exactly what you're doing. 1 in 5 Americans have learn a new language on their bucket list. If that's you, make 2025 the year you get started with Babbel. Here's a special offer for our listeners, and it's only for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Oklahoma. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Just use Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. And if you want a live classroom experience from the comfort of your home, Babbel Live is for you. Babbel Live classes are available 7 days a week at any time of day and taught by over 450 certified teachers so you can learn on your schedule. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/Oklahoma. That's BABBEL.com/Oklahoma. Rules and restrictions may apply.
And this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/OKC to get 10% off your first month. This month is all about finding comfort. Being with the family this time of year brings a lot of people comfort, but the holiday season, it could be a little overwhelming. And that's where therapy can help so many people this time of year. I'm a big believer in therapy, believe it can help so many people if you're just willing to try it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you go from there. You can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/OKC to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/OKC to get 10% off your first month.
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, if it was as cut and dry as the NFL was we've got so many different conferences. The level of play between the top team and the bottom team in this level of college football is absurd. But you do have currently, and it is weird to try and fix something before we've even had the first iteration of it, as you've said. But you got the Arizona and Boise State, got the byes. Some people are upset by that. But is there, under the current format, even a way to fix that? Does it need to be fixed? I mean, if you're playing an extra game in a conference championship and you win it, I mean, I almost think that it's unavoidable to some degree with the format that we have.
Yeah, I don't mind you having guaranteed spots at the table for conference champs. It just attaching an auto buy to the top four ranked conference champs is very counterintuitive to me. I think it really derives from the resistance to reality. It's a good podcast name, actually. The resistance to reality.
Story of my life.
I would love to cling to the past here because my ideal utopian world in college football is the conferences are much smaller. They're all roughly comparable, like Pac-10, SEC, comparable, ACC, Southwest Conference, whatever. They're very comparable. That is not the world we live in anymore. But people kind of want to still cling to it. And what I mean by that is when it comes time to field a postseason field, they kind of want to treat all conference champs as not equal, but comparable. Well, they won this conference and they won that conference, so that we should treat them all, we should batch them up and treat them all the same. You shouldn't. You talked about the gap between the best and the worst team in college football. Of course, that's wide. I think you got to talk about the gap between the conferences because that's the schedule you're playing. You're playing 8 or 9 games against a conference schedule, a league schedule. And to look at the Mountain West and to look at the SEC, even in what was a down year for the SEC, I'm going to play 6 games tougher than the toughest game Boise played all year. The only test, relatively speaking, that Boise was able to get themselves was going to play Oregon, and that they had to do that out of conference, and they lost the game competitively, but they lost the game. You will never convince me that strength of schedule is measured properly in this sport. And then you've still got a bunch of people at the end of the day who will never divorce themselves from the idea that you are what your record says you are. Because in pro sports, that's true. In college football, that is not true. I could go 8-4 in the SEC, and if I played Florida's schedule, I may still have a more impressive win than your most impressive win if you go 11-1 or 12-0 in the Mountain West, which is absurd. But all that tells you is there is a different level of football being played. Now, the common sense move would be to acknowledge that and to not hate on Boise or not hate on UNLV or anything. The common sense approach would be, you guys ought to have your own playoff, really. There ought to be a line well before 134 teams, and you ought to commonsensically say, you guys are working with a fraction of the resources and facilities. Your donor budget is a fraction of the big boys. It's absurd to think that New Mexico State and Alabama are playing the same sport. Why don't we get you guys your own playoff? And if you want a promotion and relegation system, whatever, but you ought to be playing in your own playoff. You say that, and they bristle at it, and they think it's a shot at them, and they think it's disrespectful to them, and you're trying to box us out. You're already boxed out. And
the thing I'll say, though, is the other dynamic that we have here that you don't in professional sports is the reason they don't want that is because they become tier 2 schools,
correct,
and it's all about getting kids into their school for tuition.
Yeah.
Is what it's all about. That's why they want to, there's 130 and they're fighting to be into that crowd is about tuition, not really about wins. They don't think they can win a championship.
That's right. So it's about a financial umbilical cord, really is what it's about.
It's the same thing with the conference game.
That's correct.
That's it. It's money.
So my question, if I'm working the commissioner angle here, is we've always heard these whispers about private money, private equity getting into college football, but it's always, are they going to align with this major conference or this major program? To me, if I'm running like Gabe Ikard Enterprises and I've got a multi-billion-dollar war chest, this is very figurative, and I got a multi-billion-dollar war chest over here, to me, if I did a healthy assessment of the landscape of college football, That would be my entry point. I would look at the G5 level and I would say, why don't these people have a playoff? And then Teddy would come in and say, well, they've got to maintain the illusion that they're playing in the same league as 134 other teams because there's a financial umbilical cord there that they have to have. They have to be subsidized. And then my question would be, but what if they were subsidized through other means? Would they need that anymore? And the answer would be no. Well, tell us your plan. Well, my plan is for private equity to bankroll that level of football to create a self-sustaining playoff for that level of football. And again, I am not crazy about the whole private equity angle inserting itself into college football. All I'm trying to do is call it like I see it. And it looks like that's going to happen anyway. So if it's going to happen, can we please not accomplish something meaningful for just normal college football fans in the process? I'm workshopping this. That'll be in the inaugural speech. That's something I'm workshopping.
You have my vote. You have my vote, Pate. And I can't believe all the things that we have covered. I mean, this was just supposed to be, hey, tell me who you think's going to win this weekend. And look at, I should have known. I should have known that you would have it would have gone down just multiple.
Read the text. So Ikard texted me this morning and he says, and I quote, man, I've got a lot of texts. I can't even find you anymore. Oh yeah. He says, pumped to have you on this morning. And I said, frankly, you should be. I knew we had a lot to talk about. I knew we could go another hour if we wanted to.
You're the man. Just to recap, and we're talking strictly winners, not against the spread. You like Notre Dame?
Yes.
Penn State?
Yes.
Texas?
Yep.
And then you're going to be in Columbus.
Yeah. I'm going to Ohio State. I'm nervous about it. I think Tennessee's going to cover, and the number's 7.5. So obviously, I think very close one possession game decided fourth quarter. And if it goes bad for Ohio State, anything's on the table. Doesn't matter how ludicrous it sounds. Doesn't matter how good Ryan Day's record is. It's that uneasy up there right now to where you also got to think you can't do this in a vacuum anymore. You've got to understand. I was up in that building this past spring. Sat down with Ryan, sat down with all their coaches, sat down with Ross Bjork. He had just walked in the door as the new AD. They emphasized how all in they were on 2024. If it doesn't work in 2024, what you have is you've got maybe the inability to go back to the same people that you asked to be all in for 2024 and have them be all in again. Because they're going to look at you and say, we spent that much money for what, another loss to Michigan? Like, until something changes, you're not getting that from me. That stuff can happen. Even at Ohio State, that stuff can happen.
Feels like they better start the game fast too.
Yeah, it feels that way. Sure does feel that way.
I assume you're going to be bundled up. Got to stay warm, man. We're too old to be cold anymore. All the tough guy stuff, leave it off to the side. Just wear the appropriate amount of layers.
I may go to the press box for this game. You will never respect me less than if you see me Saturday. I days off me Saturday.
I appreciate all this time, man. You're the best. Before you get out of here, probably won't have you on until the season's over, and then we'll have our deep philosophical discussion in the offseason and solve all of the problems in college football. But who do you like to win it all at the end of the day, this thing?
All right. So I've got a theory that Georgia's going to be okay without Carson Beck. And I've got a theory that is not a quarterback-centric team. So when you lose Carson Beck, it's a bad thing. But I think we may have talked about this on the show before. If you've ever been in a really good culture locker room and you lose someone and you got a bunch of talented dudes in that locker room, there is a galvanization that happens. There is a collective understanding that we've got to pick up the slack to the point where if you're as talented as Georgia, every position group and room buying into the idea of picking up the slack could end up in the aggregate elevating your level of play above that which you were playing at earlier. And if that happens, they're going to go win the national championship because the draw that they would get in the final is either Oregon or Texas. And like either one of them, I think they match up half decently with. If it's Texas, I've seen it twice already. I mean, I saw him trail Texas and come from behind to win with that backup quarterback in the same building they would be playing the game in, by the way. So I've got a weird theory that it's going to be Georgia, but I also wouldn't be shocked if Notre Dame beats them. So whatever.
There's some mystery there too. You don't exactly know what you're preparing for when you're looking at Georgia
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
Pate, you're the man. I still can't believe you wore a shirt with a pattern on it. It's going to
I
take
can't
me a
either.
while to get over. But hey, man, appreciate the time, and you deserve all the success that you have right now, man. You're absolutely killing it. It is must listen stuff. I don't watch on YouTube. I listen to the audio version. Is
Fair.
that okay?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
Okay.
look, come on.
Okay.
Half the
Just
people
making
would
sure.
tell you it's probably better to listen to anyway, because then you don't have to look at me.
You're the man. Appreciate you, buddy.
Appreciate it, guys.
Pate's the best.
Awesome. I was thrown though with the camo t-shirt. I didn't know what was happening.
Still haven't gotten over it. We recorded that yesterday. I've thought about it multiple times.
As soon as I logged into the Zoom, I was like, who the hell is that guy?
That's awesome. We don't need to talk about the Thunder losing the NBA Cup Finals, do we?
Ah,
The Cup's stupid anyways, Ted. I certainly
And-
wouldn't made a big deal.
yeah.
Made it a big deal if they would have won it. I wouldn't have done that. Not me. No chance.
In no way does that replicate postseason play at all.
Well, the thing about postseason play is you get a series. It's not just one game. And when you're 5 of 32 from three,
Ouch.
it's hard to win the game. What just an abysmal shooting night for the Thunder. And let's get one thing straight. All these people, oh, the Thunder don't have an answer for Giannis. Yeah. Yeah. No one does. The guy's a complete freak. What do you mean? Oh, they don't have an answer for Giannis. They can't guard Giannis. Yeah. Neither can the rest of the league. It's why he's Giannis.
That's a
What are
good
we
point.
even talking about?
Good point.
Disappointed how it went. Still very excited for the rest of the season.
It's okay. Nothing is derailed. The trajectory is still where it needs to be.
Let's be done because OU and Michigan are about to tip off.
Yes.
Birthday shout outs. Happy 12th birthday to Ben Bray.
Happy 44th birthday to Jared Greiger.
Happy 27th birthday. She just needs one name. Mallory.
And happy birthday to Joe Catrone.
I think you nailed it.
I hope so.
Catrone.
Catrone.
One of those is correct for sure. Episode 484 in the books. We'll have a new podcast that'll drop on Sunday. Just a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And go check out our website, okbreakdown.com. We've got everything in one spot for you now. Hope you all have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the weekend. And until next time, we appreciate you all for listening. Do what you always do, Oklahoma. Take care of each other.